Gabe Kid steals shocking win over Orange Cassidy. Orange Cassidy just lost to Gabe Kid. And before the Gabe Kid supporters in this comment section start celebrating and before the Orange Cassidy loyalists start typing their defensive responses, I need every single one of you to stop and actually think about what that sentence means. Because the result itself is not the story. The way the result happened is not entirely the story. The story, the full, layered, genuinely uncomfortable story that this match has opened up, is something that both sides of this divide are going to find deeply, specifically, personally aggravating in ways they did not expect when they sat down to watch Gabe Kid versus Orange Cassidy. Gabe Kid stole this win. The word matters. Steal. Not earned in the conventional sense that professional wrestling's competitive moral framework typically applies to victory. Not produced through sustained, dominant performance that left Orange Cassidy unable to answer at the conclusion. Not the result of Gabe Kid simply being the better man on this specific night in this specific match under these specific conditions. Stolen. Taken by means that are going to be debated in comment sections and fan forums and wrestling podcasts for weeks. Taken in a way that leaves the result on the record but leaves the truth of what actually happened between these two people on this night considerably more complicated than any official result can capture. And here is what is going to make the people who already dislike Gabe Kid absolutely incandescent with rage, and what is going to make the people who already love Gabe Kid defend him with maximum ferocity. The win was brilliant. Whatever you think of the method, whatever your position on the ethics of what Kid did in those final moments of the match, whatever your feelings about Orange Cassidy and what he deserved from this contest, the specific execution of how Gabe Kid secured this win was brilliant, and acknowledging that brilliance is going to cost some of you something emotionally. Welcome to the most divisive match result in professional wrestling this week. Let's go through every inch of it. Let's start with Gabe Kid, because the specific nature of this win, the fact that it was stolen rather than earned cleanly, is actually the wrong framework for assessing what he did if you do not first understand who Gabe Kid actually is as a competitor and what his entire professional philosophy is built around. Gabe Kid is not a performer whose goal is to produce the most aesthetically satisfying version of professional wrestling. He is not in the ring to give you a match that makes you nod appreciatively at the craft on display, that rewards your understanding of in-ring structure with a sequence of events that builds to a conclusion you feel emotionally satisfied by. Gabe Kid is in the ring to win, not to be seen to win. Not to win in a way that generates the specific respect that clean victories generate. To win by whatever the most available and most effective means happens to be in the specific moment where the match is decided. That philosophy, which exists in genuine philosophical tension with how a significant portion of the professional wrestling audience wants to experience the product, is what makes Gabe Kid simultaneously one of the most genuinely compelling competitors in the sport right now and one of the most genuinely polarizing. Because the audience does not agree on whether winning is sufficient or whether the method of winning is a moral and aesthetic statement that carries its own weight independent of the result. Gabe Kid says winning is sufficient. Full stop. The result is what the record shows. The record is what history remembers. The feelings of the people watching about the specific mechanism of the result are not his responsibility and not his concern. That is a position. It is a consistent, principled, articulable position that a lot of people find deeply objectionable. And the objection itself, the specific nature of the outrage that Gabe Kid generates through this philosophy, is exactly what he uses as fuel. He does not need your approval. He does not need your respect. He needs your engagement. And whether that engagement comes in the form of admiration or fury, it is the same engagement. It sustains the same career. It fills the same arenas. Gabe Kid understanding this, using the outrage as deliberately as any other tool available to him, is what elevates him from a one-note he'll act into something more interesting and more durable. He is not playing a character who cheats. He is playing a character who has a genuinely different theory of competition than the one the audience subscribes to. And theories that the audience genuinely disagrees with produce more sustained engagement than characters they simply boo. Now let's be direct about Orange Cassidy and what the loss to Gabe Kid on this night means for where he is in his competitive story right now. Orange Cassidy losing is not a neutral event. It never has been, which is one of the things that makes the performed indifference of his character so effective as a storytelling tool, because when someone who appears not to care loses, the audience is forced to decide whether the loss validates the indifference or exposes something beneath it. Is Orange Cassidy genuinely fine? Or is the hands-in-pockets presentation a defense mechanism that the loss has just compromised? The specific circumstances of this loss, the stolen nature of the win, the fact that what Gabe Kid secured was not a definitive demonstration of his superiority but rather an exploitation of a specific vulnerability at a specific moment, create a version of the Orange Cassidy loss narrative that is more complicated than a simple defeat. Because Cassidy was not beaten comprehensively. He was not taken apart in a way that left no question about the gap between the two competitors. He was beaten through a specific act of competitive intelligence that targeted a specific weakness and exploited it with sufficient timing and sufficient commitment to produce a result that Kid could not have produced through straightforward competition alone. That distinction matters enormously for how Orange Cassidy recovers from this. A comprehensive defeat, one where Gabe Kid simply outperformed him from bell to bell, would demand a certain kind of response. A period of reassessment. A visible reckoning with the competitive gap. A story about rebuilding something that was broken. What actually happened demands a different response. Because what happened was not Orange Cassidy being broken, it was Orange Cassidy being tricked. And there is a meaningful difference between those two things in terms of what they require from a performer going forward. You rebuild from broken. You respond to tricked. The response Orange Cassidy now has to produce and the timeline of that response, the form it takes, the opponent it is directed at is the most interesting open question in his current story. Because the audience needs to see what Orange Cassidy looks like when the hands come out of the pockets, and what is underneath is not the surprising competitive capacity that his character occasionally reveals, but something more specifically targeted. Something that has Gabe Kid's specific brand of intelligence in its sights. Let's go through the match itself in the detail it deserves, because the result did not come from nowhere and the specific journey of the contest is the best evidence available for understanding what the result actually means. The early portions of Gabe Kid vs Orange Cassidy operated with the specific dynamic that their characters make inevitable, Kid bringing sustained, committed aggression that communicates competitive urgency at every moment, Cassidy bringing the deliberately paced, apparently low-effort approach that his character demands and that the most attentive watching reveals as something considerably more calculated than it appears. The gap between how Orange Cassidy competes and how he appears to compete is the central intellectual puzzle of watching him in any match. He is not actually doing less. He is doing a precisely calibrated amount that is sufficient for the specific moment the match is in, no more, because unnecessary effort is philosophically objectionable to him, but also never less than what the moment requires. The performance of indifference is the performance. Underneath it, the competitive intelligence is always fully operational. Gabe Kid knows this. He did not walk into this match believing the character. He walked in having prepared for the competitor beneath the character. And the specific preparation he did, the specific aspects of Orange Cassidy's competitive tendencies that he targeted throughout the match, was evident in how the contest developed from the middle stages onward. The match's middle section was the most revealing stretch. Both performers abandoning the comfortable operating range of their respective characters and being pushed into territory that tested them differently. Kid in sequences that required him to sustain pressure against someone who is more resourceful at the granular level than any simple aggression-based approach can fully neutralize. Cassidy in sequences that required the hands to come out of the pockets and the competitive urgency to show itself in ways that the character's armor of indifference does not always gracefully accommodate. In those sequences, the ones where both performers were operating closer to their actual competitive identities than their character presentations, the match became genuinely excellent. Not in the way that a carefully constructed, carefully paced narrative match becomes excellent, where you feel the architecture throughout and appreciate the craft of how the structure serves the story. In the rawer way that a match becomes excellent when two people who are genuinely trying to impose their will on each other produce something that neither of them entirely planned. The final sequence, the passage from the match's legitimate competitive conclusion into the moment where Gabe Kid executed the thing that made this win stolen rather than earned, was where craft gave way to something colder and more specifically calculated. Because what Kid did in those last moments was not a desperate improvisation from someone who was losing and ran out of options. It was patient. It was timed. It was clearly something he had been waiting for the opportunity to deploy rather than something he arrived at reactively. Which means he had planned for it. Which means the entire match from Kid's perspective was building toward a specific outcome achieved through a specific method that he had determined in advance was available if he could create the right conditions. And creating the right conditions for a predetermined conclusion in a professional wrestling match without the other person knowing the conclusion has been predetermined is an act of competitive intelligence that is genuinely difficult to perform well. Gabe Kid performed it well, and the result is on the record. Here is where we have to be specific, because the specific nature of what Gabe Kid did to close out this match is the most debated element of the entire event, and I want to give this community the clearest possible account of what actually transpired so that the debate can be conducted on accurate information rather than the partial and sometimes colored versions that have been circulating. In the closing moments of the match, with the competitive dynamic genuinely in question, with neither performer having yet established the decisive advantage that legitimate match conclusions require, Gabe Kid introduced a variable that was not part of the established competitive framework of the match. The specific form that variable took is less important than what it accomplished. What it accomplished was the creation of a specific, brief, targeted window of vulnerability in Orange Cassidy's defensive positioning that Kid had been engineering toward throughout the match's latter stages. Within that window, which lasted perhaps 3 seconds at maximum before Cassidy's competitive intelligence would have recognized and responded to it, Kid did exactly what he had planned to do. Exactly what the entire match, from his perspective, had been building toward. With the timing precision that separates performers who think about matches architecturally from performers who simply respond to moments as they arrive. The crowd's reaction in the immediate aftermath was the specific sound of an audience processing two things simultaneously. The reality of the result, Gabe Kid's hand raised, the official record showing a victory that cannot be taken back regardless of the conversation it generates. And the reality of the method, a win that was achieved through means that leave a significant portion of the audience feeling that what they witnessed was not a genuine competitive conclusion but rather a competitive conclusion by other means. Both of those things are true simultaneously. The win is real. The discomfort with how it was secured is also real. And the tension between those two truths is exactly where Gabe Kidd wants the conversation to live. Because that tension is his oxygen. The most urgent question produced by Gabe Kidd's stolen win over Orange Cassidy is not whether the win counts or how it should be viewed historically or where it places Kidd in the competitive hierarchy. Those are interesting secondary questions, and this community is going to debate them thoroughly in the comments. The most urgent question is what Orange Cassidy does next. And the specific form that question takes, whether he pursues the rematch directly, whether he steps back and allows the story to develop at the pace the character's philosophy demands, or whether the specific loss produces a version of Orange Cassidy that none of the above applies to because what Kidd did is crossed a line that changes the terms of the response entirely, is the question that defines this story's next chapter. There is a version of this story where Orange Cassidy does nothing immediately obvious, where the hands go back in the pockets, where the character performs its customary indifference while the competitor beneath it processes the loss and determines the response with the patience that tends to make Orange Cassidy's most decisive competitive moments so effective because they arrive from a place of complete preparation rather than reactive urgency. There is another version where the specific nature of what was done to him, the theft of it, the premeditation, the specific act of intelligence applied against him produces something from Orange Cassidy that the character's indifference armor cannot contain. A response that is not performed. That is not filtered through the cool aesthetic of the character. That is just Orange Cassidy the competitor responding directly to what Gabe Kidd the competitor did. That version of Orange Cassidy is the version his most devoted audience watches every match hoping to see. And Gabe Kidd, intentionally or as a consequence of his method, may have just guaranteed that version's emergence at the worst possible time for himself. A win over Orange Cassidy, however, it was secured as a result with genuine career weight for Gabe Kidd. Because Orange Cassidy on the record of a win is not a name that registers as a placeholder or a transitional moment. It is a name that carries competitive credibility across multiple markets and multiple audience demographics in professional wrestling. A win over Orange Cassidy means something. It is credited at its full value regardless of the methodology debates that surround this specific instance. For Gabe Kidd's trajectory, for the ongoing case he is building through results and performances, and the specific character philosophy he deploys, this win is a significant asset. It goes on the record. It becomes part of the argument. It is cited in future competitive conversations as evidence that Kidd belongs at the level he is claiming to occupy. And because Kidd's philosophy holds that the win is the thing and the method is irrelevant to the win's value, he carries this result without the asterisk that others would apply to it. That is either the most ruthlessly effective competitive philosophy in professional wrestling or the most morally bankrupt one, depending on where you stand. And where you stand on that question is going to determine everything about how you engage with Gabe Kidd's career going forward. Gabe Kidd stole a win over Orange Cassidy. The record shows the win. The memory shows how it happened. And the wrestling world is divided on what both of those things mean. I need everything in the comments right now. Does a stolen win count at full value, or does the method permanently qualify the result? Is Gabe Kidd a genius or a fraud, and is there actually a meaningful difference in professional wrestling between those two things? And the question that is going to produce the most passionate responses in this community: what does Orange Cassidy do next? And when he does it start with hands in pockets or hands out? Drop every word. Share this video with every wrestling fan you know right now, because this result has produced the exact kind of furious debate that the entire wrestling community needs to be part of. Subscribe to Wrestling News CC and activate every notification, because the Orange Cassidy response to this, when it comes, in whatever form it takes, is going to be something you cannot afford to miss. Gabe Kidd's name is on the record. Orange Cassidy's name is in his plans. Neither of those things is changing anytime soon. And professional wrestling in 2026 is better for the war that just started between them.